So I'm joined today by Seb Wagner. He is a CTA and well known in the Salesforce world, but he's actually an author of a book which has just been published on Amazon. So the book's called The Software Architect's Edge: 7 Mission Critical Skills Needed to Become the Next Tech Superstar. So the 7 skills are open-mindedness, smart learning, collaboration, problem solving, technical storytelling, balancing technical and business skills, and well-being. So I thought it'd be fascinating to spend some time with Seb and find out why he wrote the book and just dig into some of those 7 skills. So thank you for joining me. Writing a book is not easy. I've written several. I know it's a labour of love. So first of all, why did you write the book?
The inspiration for the book came from the idea of creating a series of LinkedIn posts to announce that Vinay Sale would be joining Flow Republic as a coach. And as we created the outline, the content just grew larger and larger, and the posts turned into articles to be posted on LinkedIn. Those articles then turned into larger blog posts, and at some point we was like, that's not really the right format anymore. So then I decided to actually turn it into an ebook. And since I've been working with my personal coach, he was like, why don't you do this properly and actually publish it as well? So here we are a couple of months later, a lot of sleepless mornings.
So that's great. So you've written the book. Is it available?
Yes. So the book is available on Amazon, pretty much in all the stores around the globe, in paperback and Kindle version.
Yeah, and I think whilst everyone likes to read things online, I think there's something about having a physical book. You can write notes in it, put your own annotations. I think there's something nice about actually having a physical book, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, you can't see my library behind me, but I prefer physical books as well.
So there you go. I've got a whole list of there, and you can tell the ones which are really good books because they're dogged. I've gone back to them. I've used them as research. It's not just something you read once like a novel. You go back to it again and again. So I think that brings us to the book. You talk about the 7 skills. These presumably all the technical skills that you need to be an architect, or is there more to it than that?
It is about everything but technical skills, to be honest, because yes, clearly technical skills are of utmost importance for architects, especially for technical architects. But, as a coach, a lot of the focus in my work is on the non-technical skills, because at the end of the day, you can learn the technical stuff and it's a matter of memorization, but where people have real challenges are the specific 7 skills that I'm covering in that book. So what we've done is we've broken down the book into 7 distinct chapters, each chapter kind of addressing one particular skill. And what's funny is, as I was writing the book, I was collaborating with a lot of CTAs that had gone through my program, as well as a lot of architects in the community, and everybody's like, oh yeah, holy shit, this is really what people need. So this is not just something that was made out of thin air, but this is really 7 years, 8 years of coaching practice, and really a need that exists in the communities, as people that have seen the book and read it will attest.
Yeah. I think that what's interesting is that the titles of the 7 skills are not necessarily the things you go, oh, I definitely need one of those. It's like open-mindedness or smart learning or storytelling.
Yeah.
So it'd be really good if you could, obviously you know the 7 skills so well, that's been part of your life writing the book for the last X years. Can you just run through each one and just give me a little, a pen sketch about what it is and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the book is broken down into 7 chapters, as I had said, and the first chapter is titled Open-mindedness. So everybody's like, what is that supposed to be? And I had a back and forth with the reviewers. That's actually confidence. And it's like, yeah, confidence is part of it. But at the end of the day, what I experience pretty much every time I'm starting to work with somebody is that they kind of get stuck on the solution that they're coming up with in the moment when they're kind of reading the requirements, when they're preparing their solution design. So open-mindedness is really about understanding your own thought process better? How do you actually arrive at the decision? What are some of the so-called cognitive biases that influence how we're interpreting and perceiving information and how we arrive at conclusions? So what that means is open-mindedness is about decision making, and as such also how do we actually make assumption? Because what happens in a lot of cases is people are baking assumptions into their solution design or into their design without necessarily really thinking about them. A lot of subconscious assumptions, sometimes outrageous assumptions. So that's really what open-mindedness is about on the one hand, and on the other hand, really allowing yourself to be uncertain, kind of starting to embrace this feeling of uncertainty, not as something negative, but something to be embraced with an open mind. And that's why we kind of arrived at the title open-mindedness, you know. And in that part, of course, also like we have a line in there, you know. Maybe you don't suck, you know. Like a lot of architects that I'm working with, that are preparing for the biggest challenge in their career in the Salesforce ecosystem, they have a lot of self-doubt, you know, because it's not perfect yet, and there's so many mistakes in it. It's like, damn, we started somewhere at some point, you know, all of us. So. Really being a little bit more kind with yourself, and that's why it's open-mindedness at the end of the day. Yeah.
Excellent. I think Mark Benioff talks about start with a beginner's mindset. So actually, rather than the preconceived ideas. Okay, so the second thing was smart learning. So that presumably just means AI, doesn't it?
Of course, there is some AI in there. So before I jump into the AI part, I mean, a lot of the work that our clients have to do is self-study. You know, everybody has their system and application architect credentials, and one would assume, oh yeah, they know everything on those topics. But we have an exercise in the beginning of our coaching program, which is you have to do a gap analysis, where we throw like a mind map with, I think at the moment, 800 items to kind of humble some people, you know, so they realize what is it that they don't know, and they have to grade themselves. And once you have that foundation, you realize, oh shit, like I probably don't know everything that I need to know. So how can I learn this effectively? And you know, I blame Trailhead to an extent for the lack of learning skills, practical learning skills that people have nowadays. Because everything is kind of broken down and put into like bite-sized learning chunks. But what's missing overall is, what is this actually? You know, my favorite example is Salesforce Canvas. It is one of the best topics to actually improve your study skills, because it encompasses so many different concepts. It is about integration, it's about user experience and identity. And how do you actually learn something as complicated as that brings everything together? How do you take notes? You know, it sounds very basic, and at the end of the day, there's no black magic in the book, but it's practical wisdom. You know, the stuff that I've written down is what has proven itself over years for myself as well as for our students to work. So what happens in the beginning, a lot of people are like, oh man, I don't want to do this. And it's like, trust me, just go with the flow and do as you're told, you know, and then thank me afterwards. And the sentiment is okay. That was not easy, but it's really helpful. You know, so smart learning is really about how to be most effective when it comes to learning. And what we have done is obviously, it's the time of AI. I've curated a prompt that the readers can actually use to get a relatively broad overview about any subject, assuming that it's available in the cutoff date, to get a starting point. And the example that I'm using is Salesforce Canvas once again. So what are the key concepts included? What are the use cases? So you have a starting point, and from there you can start your learning journey on any given subject.
But also smart learning, I think, surely is about understanding your learning style. We all learn in different ways, so it's making sure that you approach things in a way that that works best for you. So that's number 2. Number 3 was collaboration.
Wait,
So,
can I stop you there for a second? Because
yeah, of course, yeah.
you're pressing a very strong point for me.
Yeah.
Learning styles do not exist. They are learning
Okay.
preferences. Okay, it's actually
Okay.
I've put it in the book explicitly because I believe that as well till I actually started researching the topic. And what happens is we have learning preferences. For me, it's reading and taking handwritten notes. For somebody else, it might be learning through video. You know, but at the end of the day, if I have to use a video to learn it, the results are the same. You know, compared to writing, but like reading and writing. So preferences, yes.
Okay. Thank you for stopping me. That's a really important distinction. Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Um, so so the next thing I think was on the list was number three was collaboration.
Exactly, collaboration. And that's going to be an interesting one for a lot of people because when we think about collaboration, it's all about teamwork and being empathic and being nice. And I go the opposite direction. And not to be controversial by no means, but you know, in our coaching, there is a lot of one-to-one work with the candidates, and we're simulating QAs with them. So part of the exam is you do your solution presentation, and then you have to defend it with the judges, and it's tough, you know. So what we do is we actually put up the pressure, we challenge, we make people a little bit uncomfortable, and what happens is they tend to fall into like two responses: fight or flight. You know, flight is either they just start talking without really being mindful of what they're saying, yeah? Or their flight, so they're getting quiet. You know, it's very interesting, and that's why for us collaboration is really about being more direct. You know, challenging people within an agreed container. So what I'm not saying is, hey, go out and be confrontational or aggressive in your communication, but create a container where you can turn up the pressure so that you learn to deal with that more effectively. You know, that's one part of the collaboration aspect, and that's really the result of years of coaching that people are not used to that. And I love confrontation on a professional level, or like, you know, like being in a little bit more challenging environment. I personally, if you ask my wife, I will try to avoid any kind of conflict with her.
Well, I think
But
that
that's the
there's
one part.
also a level of being candid and honest,
Yeah,
and being able to present that in the right way. And quite
exactly.
often, someone's got a preconceived idea of this is the right solution. Well, actually,
Hmm.
it may be based on incorrect assumptions. So you can't just
Exactly.
let that slide.
Like,
You've got to address that.
yes, exactly. And this is really where the different skills start to work together. So on the one hand, you have the open-mindedness to actually reflect on your own thought process. You know, how do you arrive at the ideas that you're having and the suggestions that you're making? And then on the other side, you're kind of creating this safe container for people to challenge you, you know, and to get better, and also to challenge others. Um, and how do you actually study effectively with a group? Again, you know, I have lots of experienced architects that run workshops that one would actually assume they kind of know how to run those shows, but for some reason, if it's outside of their professional environments, things are not running as smoothly as they could. My favorite example is I have a study group of people that are joining on the Saturdays, and sometimes in the beginning I would actually drop in, and they're 60 minutes into the call and nothing has gotten done, like nothing, because nobody's prepared, like there's no agenda. So there are some practical tips also on how do you actually collaborate more effectively when it comes to studying and learning. And clearly you can take this into your professional life as well. So yeah,
Well,
collaboration.
I read a book a long time ago called Business Improv. So
Hmm.
you think about improv comedy, you always think about it being comedy, but actually, every conversation at work often is improv. Yeah, you may have an idea about the agenda, but actually things happen. And
Exactly.
improv is three things. It's number one is listen, and it's not
Hmm.
listening, waiting for the person to stop talking so you can start. It's generally
Yeah.
listening to what were they talking about. The second thing is say yes.
Hmm.
So it's yes and great. Okay, how do we build on that? And the last one is commit. Okay, let's right, whatever we're doing, let's get involved rather than standing back. And I think those they're the comedy skills, but they're actually the skills that are part of the collaborative skills.
Yes.
I found it fascinating doing some of these improv comedy classes and how it applied back into the workplace, and certainly into the things that I do, standing on stage or interviewing panels, or even what we're doing now. So those sorts of skills, you can look outside the normal workplace for other aspects of, okay, how can I learn from other people? Yeah. Interesting. Exactly. Okay, so the next one is problem solving. Well, clearly that's just technical, isn't that? That's what a CTA does. They solve problems. So I'm sure you're going to come up with a very different perspective I hadn't thought of. So talk me through problem solving.
It's interesting. If you ask any consultant, it's like, hey, are you good at problem solving? The answer will be yes. But then if you put a wicked problem in front of them, or like somewhat of a more complex challenge that they need to dissect and propose a solution for on the spot, people start to struggle. Now, what I'm proposing in problem solving is a variety of different techniques that make it very easy for architects, developers, and consultants as well to approach problems. One of my favorite examples, and it's also included in the book, is from one of our scenarios in the program. It's like a legacy web shop, they want to move the CRM operations into Salesforce, what to do with the web shop. The amount of insane solutions that I've gotten from experience are insane, by the way. Yeah, so I apologize if anybody feels offended now, but it really shows that people are good at solving isolated problems, but as soon as it becomes bigger, like smaller, discrete problems that are kind of feeding into each other, people start losing track of the bigger picture. So how can you actually address that? Breaking the problem down, using a people process technology framework to take a more abstract look and getting an understanding of the problem itself, whatever it is. Is it a business requirement? Is it an objective? So we're doing that, and we're equipping people with different lenses. So people process technology being one of them, process lens. So really looking at the end-to-end process. Johan Firman, one of my CTAs and former CTA coach before he moved to Capgemini, when he was a student, he was preaching to the people in his cohort, like, remember what Seb told you? You need to understand the process. And it's surprising how often people solve the individual requirements, but not necessarily the end-to-end process itself. And 5 more lenses in the book, and I think we would exceed the scope if we were to go in all of them. But it's end-to-end problem solving.
But a lot of what we end up doing is trying to sell an idea or make sure that people take that on board. So I think the next one was all about storytelling, and you called it technical storytelling.
Yes.
So I think, again, important, back to it's the personal skills, the interpersonal, the communication skills. So do you want to talk about that for a moment? Yeah,
absolutely. The reason why I prefixed it technical storytelling, because when you go on Google and search for storytelling, you get bombarded with ideas and content around marketing and sales. But there is a component of storytelling that is really important for us as technology experts. How do I convey a solution with a solid justification that gets the buy-in of the audience? And we're using a very simple story structure. So 3 different elements where you link the requirements where you link your solution to the requirement, and you're providing a solid justification with the necessary level of detail. Because if I speak to the CEO, the CEO has very different levels of understanding and critical points that he wants to understand and he needs to hear to get the buy-in compared to developers. So we're talking about, on the one hand, how do you convey the information? What's the right level of detail, and what's the amount of information you're putting in? So depth as well as breadth in there. And there's definitely going to be a second book. Actually, there will be more books, but I will work on a broader perspective on storytelling. But at the end of the day, this is the essence. If you look into some of the exam results from individuals who have attempted the CTA review board, people that have not owned those storytelling skills get a B minus, like has not sufficiently linked the solution to the requirements, or has not provided the necessary context to the diagram. So we're covering all of those basic skills. And I know there are a lot of people listening to this and it's like, yeah, I do this already. Maybe, but I would suggest have a look into the book, and see what you can learn, because again, at the end of the day, I work with hundreds of architects, and the majority is not where they could be in regards to fundamental storytelling.
But it's not storytelling. All sounds like it's standing up and presenting, but it could be presenting, but it's also written. I always think about the 3 core skills that you need, irrespective of what you're doing. My daughter's a songwriter in LA. My son's doing a PhD at Cornell. Those skills are relevant to them as much as it is to. I'm still working on them, and they are being able to write well, being able to present well, be able to network. All of those, I think, are also encompassed in lots of the things that you're talking about, which is that storytelling could be, you've got to present it as a written document, and then you need to go and present it in person. So, and again, you've got to think about what the audience is. I mean, when you wrote the book, you had to think about what's the audience. I think we kind of missed that, which is that telling the story that the audience can understand and can relate to, I think is actually a lot harder than people think. You rush into the detail when actually it's a senior person and they want to know the ROI. They actually don't want to know how much you've thought about where the data is going to come from. So again, it's about level as well, I think you talked about.
Exactly.
So the next one was balancing technical and business skills. So again, I think another different perspective that I don't think people necessarily think about. So how does that fit in?
I mean, I have to give you credit for your transitions. You spoke about ROI, and at the end of the day, balancing business and technical skills is really all about aligning the solutions that we are proposing to what the business actually needs. And in order to do that, we need to have a better grasp of what the business is about. And what I've done is I've kind of taken a couple of different perspectives. So a more meta perspective, where we are covering the 11 relevant aspects that we need to understand from the business. What's the business model, how they're generating revenue with a customer. So on the one hand, the business model, we have the operating model. So how do they actually work? Budget, stakeholders, some of the more obvious ones. But what we've done, what I've actually done here, thanks to a lot of great feedback and inputs that I've gotten from the other architects, we've put together a comprehensive chapter on those business aspects with key questions that we need to be able to understand in order to create an effective solution. Now, granted, not all the 11 aspects will be relevant for everybody in every project, but it's more or less like, hey, pick and choose. What do you need? What is valuable? And it's a great reference for architects and consultants on the one hand, and then taking the more prominent view is like, it's about the vision. What are they trying to accomplish? What do they want to do? What are the objectives and what are the challenges? Then how does that influence your solution? Because very often what I see is with techies are too focused on the technical solution and leaving all of those important aspects out. And what I've tried to do, not only what I've tried, but I think I've succeeded in using a very basic example of a business vision with some example objectives, and then really showcase how does that influence how we're designing the solution, what comes out as a solution. The other part is a business need versus requirement. As consultants, as technical resources, very often we get a user story or we get like a written requirement that in most of the cases is explicitly, I need a custom field, or I need like a flow whatsoever, without fully getting context and understanding, hey, what's the actual business need that is informing that. So problem solving, we focus on the process perspective, and in business acumen or balancing business and technical skills, it's really what does the business actually need, what are they trying to accomplish, and how can we help them. I think it's actually the most comprehensive chapter we have in the book, and that was interesting because it just kept on growing and growing, and I had to cut so much stuff out to make it also easy at the end of the day and accessible for people.
So the last of the skills actually is very different. It's called Wellbeing. So the balance of you can only do your best work if you're able to do your best work, I guess, is one way of phrasing that.
I think that sums it up perfectly. On a personal side, I've experimented a lot with meditation and breathing and mindfulness. I've been to India, I've done plenty of workshops, and despite having all that knowledge, I managed to burn myself out twice in my life. So it's a common challenge that we are facing. Especially working as an architect, we have a lot of responsibilities. We pull in long hours, and something has to give. And sometimes, or in many cases, it's our health. So what we have done in this case is, because I have actually teamed up with Sean Daughtry from the 555 Club to write a chapter on well-being, where Sean who has like this practice group where people can come together 5 times a day, whenever they want, 5 times a week, to actually do 3 basic practices that can help them to become more in tune of where they're currently at and kind of overcome their stress levels. And Sean was amazing enough to kind of put everything in there. Everything that Sean does in his 555 Club is written in the book. It's that simple, being grateful, breathing and meditating 5 minutes each, and it works. And what we have seen is, with the people in our program that are following those practices, they are more relaxed. They get better results in regards to how much time they're putting into studying and what they're getting back in return. The way they're facing challenges has become more sensible. So yeah, that's the well-being part. Again, there's no black magic, there's no secret sauce in the book, but it's tried and tested wisdom, and it's practical at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the practical aspect's really important. And it's interesting that well-being almost takes you back to the beginning about your open-mindedness, which is, if you're suffering from imposter syndrome and going, I've got to do more and I can't do it, and you're looking at other people going, they're doing better than me or they're getting ahead of me, then there's a natural inclination to just try and do more and do more. And it's good to compare yourself with others, to go, what do they do that I don't do that I could improve, rather than going comparing yourself with they're accelerating further ahead than me, or they're further, and then it drives the wrong sorts of behaviours. So I think we've almost come full circle, which is unless you have that well-being, those foundations in place, none of the rest works.
Maybe that's a little bit intense, Ian. So I think the well-being rounds it up. If it's at the end of the day, if you have a strong foundation, if you're looking after your well-being to an extent, this is where you can really strive. You can drive a car with a half-empty tank, but at some point it's going to run out of fuel.
Indeed, yeah, absolutely. So we've spent a lot of time just talking about the principles of the book, and there's so much more that the book obviously you can dig into. So again, very practical in terms of you can dip into different parts of the book. But I guess the question, think about the audience. Do you have to be a CTA to get the best out of this, or could I be like what? When you were thinking about the audience, who were you looking at?
When we wrote when I say we, there were so many people actively involved in helping me, so I tend to say we, but at the end of the day, I wrote it. The original audience for the LinkedIn post was certainly the Salesforce architect community that was preparing for the exam, because it was supposed to be a marketing tool. Everything on LinkedIn is marketing to an extent. But as an as it evolved, it became clear that there's so much good content and insights in there that applies to pretty much everybody who is working in the technology sector, and in particular those that are working in a more client-facing, forward-facing role. So certainly architects, developers, as well as consultants. Depending on where you're at in your journey, you get more or less out of it. But I think it comes down to go in, pick what you recognize you need to work on, and start applying it and implementing it. And I said it before, like I cut so much out of the business acumen stuff. I mean, I could have probably written a book that is 3 times the size, but I know myself, like I don't read those books at the end of the day. So we did an exercise of like what needs to go. What is going to be that diamond in the end that is really going to give the biggest bang for the buck. So to come back to the question, I think architects, developers, as well as consultants, anybody in tech that is working client-facing can find a lot of great insights in there and practical tools that they can literally apply as they're having the book open and reading through it.
And it feels like a book where you get more from it over time. There'll be things which you apply, and then actually as you've dug in more, or you've had a situation with a client, you can go back to the book and go, I'll reread that, and then maybe you'll look at things from a different perspective because you're in a different client environment at the time, and therefore some of the things you in the book you go, right, that didn't go as well as I expected. I could apply some different things there. So I could see it's the sort of book that you keep on coming back to, and there are post-it notes and dog-eared pages because they're the ones that you keep on going back to.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've done is I put a lot of reflection exercises in and guided questions, especially on the open-mindedness part, kind of reflecting on the decision that you have made or that you're about to make. I've put in questions around metacognition. Now it's a super fancy word, but at the end of the day, it's thinking about your own thinking. So what were the assumptions that I have made? How did I actually feel about the solution? Have I considered the alternative? So there are a lot of guided questions in there that, as I said, you can have the book open. You go through, you use it as a checklist, and you grow along with it. And at some point you don't need the book anymore because everything is in here.
Yeah, there are certain books you read and it makes you feel clever at the end of it, but actually you can't necessarily apply it. I mean, this feels a lot more practical, and I think some of the years of experience. I think because you've coached people, you put into the book a lot of the things which you've heard people have struggled with, and therefore that it comes back out. So you said there's a lot of the book that you cut lots of things out which didn't make it into the book. So what next?
So there's a lot of stuff that didn't make it in the book but will either make it into the newsletter for the book, where we're just sharing additional resources, reading lists, scenarios and such. And it will definitely go into the next books that I'm writing because, I never thought I would write a book, and I never thought I would enjoy it so much. So I have already like 3 Apple Notes with like the next 3 books that are going to come out, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to create like a small hands-on workshop, probably over like the course of 2 months, where people can actually come and practice, because at the end of the day, the book is great. You need to apply it, and if you want to have the environment to really practice and on those skills, there will be an opportunity, but that's something for next year. For now, I'm just happy it's done. I had a bottle of champagne yesterday with my wife, so a little bit relaxing and then going back to the drawing board.
Yeah, but it would be great to see you out on the speaking circuit. There's so much content here, and I think there's one thing about reading a book, but the other one is actually hearing you speak, the passion about certain things, the different perspectives, and some of the stories that come out. So hopefully we'll see you out on the Dreaming, TDX, Dreamforce, out on the speaking circuit somewhere as well.
Yeah.
So this has been a fascinating journey through both writing the book, but more importantly, actually understanding all the content in the book. I'll encourage everybody to go to Amazon, go and get your copy, read it, apply it. It's very practical. Again, Seb, so thank you so much for spending time with me.
Thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure.